Hello, and today we are going to be sharing a scary story. I don't know what this series is going to be called, but I know I'm going to be sharing scary stories. I may just call it the Scary Story Podcast. So basically, a scary story podcast is basically where you just listen to me, watch me, whatever you want, do scary stories. It might be pitch black one day, it might not. So that's what we're going to be doing. And yeah, let's get started. Here we go. Alright, so right now, this story is called My Grandma Tried to Kill Me Off the Cliff. Make sure you enjoy the video. Okay, so let's get started. Pitch blackness, start. It was a beautiful day. My grandma staring at me as always, but I was doing cartwheels in the lawn, and my parents were out of town, so I had to stay at my grandma's. And while we were doing that, I was doing cartwheels. Grandma was staring at me reading her book. I know that doesn't make any sense, but she would stare at me, then look down and read her book. And that just kept going on and on every single day. But then my grandma yelled to me and said, "Please come here, dear." And I went to her, and instead of saying, "I don't want to, Grandma, I'm doing my cartwheels, don't you see that?" Or saying, "No, Grandma, don't you see I'm busy?" Instead of saying those things, I said, "Okay, Grandma, I'm coming." And when I went to my grandma, she said, "Dear, do you want to go hiking?" I said, "Sure, Grandma." And I said, "Grandma, will we need to pack anything?" And with a very deep voice, she said, "No, dear, we're only going to be there for 2 seconds. And with an urge, feeling like I was going to barf, I didn't. I choked it back. It tastes disgusting, though. So, as I did that, my grandma went inside to go put her hiking boots on and her hiking gear. I went inside to go do the same thing. I came out 2 minutes later, dressed and ready. Yet my grandma took at least 5 minutes to get ready because she was more old than I was. And as I was waiting, like always, I went to go do my cartwheels again, but then I felt a sudden urge. Like, I felt nauseous and I felt like I was going to pass out. I snapped out of it once I saw my grandma staring at me. And she was tying up her hiking boots. So I went on the swing where she couldn't see me. She all of a sudden turned away because she knew that I felt uncomfortable, I guess. So once she turned away, I was swinging. And she came out and said, "Dear, I'm ready to go." But not with that crackle voice that she does. She sounded more clear. So I said, "Okay, Grandma." And once I went, we got in the car and I said, "Grandma, I thought it was a hike." And she said, "Dear, my legs need to rest. And you know that. They can't be holding that long." So, that kind of made sense. I mean, my grandma was 90 years old. So, we got in the car, and I fell asleep halfway through. And I had this dream where I was gonna die. I didn't know where. So I woke up with my grandma staring at me, and we were at the camping and hiking grounds. Everyone had backpacks on, and I didn't. My grandma all of a sudden stopped halfway through the path. So I wandered off by the woods right beside her. I didn't go in the woods knowing that there would probably be bears, foxes, and anything that's wild. So I didn't go in, and I knew there was probably going to be a poisonous snake. So my grandma yelled me over and said, "Dear, I'm ready to go," with that nice voice again. And I said, "Okay, Grandma." And I said maybe she took one of her itchy voice pain pills. And I just wandered with her. And once we got to the cliff, it was big, but not like big, like where there's snow on it. It was just a regular old cliff. And of course I thought it was big because I'd never seen a cliff in my life. And when I say in my life, I mean in my life. So when I did that, we went up the hill and my grandma stopped again. So I thought she needed another break. And she said, "Come on, dear, let's go to the edge." And I said, "Grandma, I don't think that's a good idea." But in my head, because I didn't want to go and be rude, so I went with her. And she said, "Isn't that a beautiful view, dear, while being behind me?" And I said, "Yes, Grandma." And I quickly turned around with her arms handed out, like she was going to push me or grab me back. So I said, "How about we keep on going?" with a scared, frightened voice. My grandma said, "That's a good idea." With another dark voice, she said, "How about we go to the top?" And I don't want to be rude and say no, so I went. Once we got all the way to the top, my grandma said, "Now look at this view, it's so beautiful." And I saw clouds, and it was so nice. But then, out of nowhere, my grandma grabbed my shoulders and moved her hands down to my back. And someone yelled, "Quick, she's gonna push you." But I couldn't hear them, of course. Luckily enough, they had a net. They put it down as quickly as they could. And my grandma pushed me. I screamed as loud as I could. And once I screamed, I quickly ran into the net. And I guess I thought I died, so I passed out. And I was in a coma for 18 months. I was taken to the hospital, and that was the worst moment of my life. I woke up 18 months later, and my grandma was in jail. And my parents were sitting right beside me from their trip. They were supposed to come back the next day. We went to that cliff. But I guess I got pushed off. And I knew I felt an urge that I wasn't going to be there tomorrow. So my parents then on stayed with me. Once my grandma got out of the jail, she tried to visit us, but as soon as my parents saw her, they didn't let her visit. So until this day, I don't go with my grandma, grandpa, or anyone at all, because you never know when they're